Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. 7th day of March, 2021. First week of March gone already. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. First hazardous weather graph. We've got blizzard warnings out for the central western Arctic coast for later tonight and tomorrow, and also for the west coast, northwest coast, Bering Strait, down into St. Lawrence Island, as well as the Yukon Delta, eastern Norton Sound there, near Lotto Hills, up to Norton Bay, and all the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, even the Kobuk Valley in the greater Ambler area there, under the influence of a blizzard warning, and the northwest areas, Noatak Valley, all for winds 40 to 60 miles an hour in gusts with snow. Several inches expected to fall, blowing around will produce whiteout conditions in all of the red zone areas there, and or at least less than a quarter mile in the visibility at times. Otherwise, a winter storm watch out for the Galena area, the lower Yukon River Valley zone there in toward the Grayling area. And you may, the system weakening as it moves inland, so you may not reach warning levels. It'll be hopefully something a little less than what they'll get on the west coast there that's going on right now. Otherwise, winter weather advisory out for the eastern Alaska range, as winds expected to pick up tomorrow and tomorrow evening with gusts to above 50 miles per hour, 40 to 50 miles an hour. And also winter weather advisory out for the eastern North Slope and the eastern Arctic coast for later tomorrow and tomorrow night, as that system eventually shifts eastward, but it'll weaken, so there won't be a warning. And from there, taking a look at satellite imagery, you can see a broad fetch of the clouds extending from southwest to northeast there, with a broad southwest flow ahead of the big low that's out over the western Bering Sea. Now pulling down very cold air out of the Russian Far East and the Sea of Okhotsk into the western Aleutians, with snow showers now into the Shimia area. And the main front just west of Adak and extends northward there, west of St. Lawrence Island, and then curves back around the north coast of Russia there, with snow and clouds taking a little longer to move eastward than we thought yesterday, but winds definitely coming up, seeing winds of 40 to 60 miles an hour in gusts already along the southwest coast there, and rain, warmer temperatures in the Pribilof Islands of the eastern Aleutians, winds kicking up, but dry conditions along the Alaska Peninsula today, and fair over Bristol Bay, but clouds on the increase there, and a high pressure ridge moving into the central interior, so it's a dry day today with some areas of clearing. And the eastern interior pretty good, but you can see some moisture there, kind of a band lifted northward there from a low center that's south of, actually west-southwest of Vancouver Island, but kind of a stationary band of moisture there, kicking off a few rain and snow showers over the southern panhandle, drier conditions back to the north. And rolling that through again, you can see pretty good conditions with high pressure shifting eastward, covering the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, of course, southern Alaska, actually extending all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. On the chart today, that high actually is in the Arctic Ocean, one center there at 1,032 millibars, another one roughly over the eastern interior at about 1,026 millibars, but that region extends all the way down across the Gulf of Alaska. We've got low pressure there well south of the panhandle, but enough moisture to kick some, or enough close enough to throw a weak band of moisture up into the southern panhandle today. But wind, snow, blowing snow on the increase. Temperatures edging above freezing into the mid-30s along the Nunivak Island area up to about Cape Romanzoff, and winds gusting 55 to 60 miles an hour there. And actually winds Bering Strait, Wales, Tin City, seeing gusts to, or Teller, Wales and Tin City, seeing gusts around 70 miles per hour this afternoon out of the south. Of course, snow, blowing snow, got blizzard conditions there from the Yukon Delta coast northward across the western Seward Peninsula, the northwest coast. Rain and wind south of there from the Pribilofs down to the western Alaska Peninsula. Just getting into False Pass, actually just no precipitation being reported at Cold Bay yet, and rain for the Fox Islands, then kind of a showery condition behind the front, and then with the colder air pushing down, rain changes to snow out over the far western Aleutians. And for tonight, we're looking at, again, blizzard warnings, Yukon Delta coast northward across the Seward Peninsula, Noatak Valley, northwest coast, western Arctic coast with increasing winds. Again, winds anywhere from 40 to 60 miles an hour in gusts. Some areas might see stronger winds, especially the higher elevations of the western Brooks Range along mountain areas and Cape Lisburne. Again, they had gusts 65 to 70 miles an hour. I forgot to mention that earlier this afternoon. And that'll continue through the night tonight and push eastward with increasing winds central and eventually the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And winds start to come up in the central interior, but that high pressure over the Northwest Territories pretty much doesn't want to let go of the eastern interior of the state. So it's going to be light winds and variably cloudy to clear conditions. And of course, colder there. That'll be the coldest part of the state. And also southern Alaska into the Gulf looks pretty good. Rain and snow showers with that persistent weak band of moisture over the central and southern southeast coast, but amounts will be light, dry to the Northland Canal and Glacier Bay with kind of a drier, colder outflow from that high over the Yukon. For tomorrow, the front swings inland and weakens, and so by tomorrow afternoon, conditions will be improving over the western interior. You can see pretty good improvement to light winds and precipitation free along the west coast as that front shifts inland. Rain and snow into Bristol Bay. Some light rain into Kodiak Island. Winds increase, especially for the Alaska Range, central interior areas, seeing an increase in the winds. Could see gusts anywhere from 30 to 50 miles an hour, all the way up to the Brooks Range. And snow and blowing snow will push eastward slowly into the Kuskokwim Valley, having trouble getting into Cook Inlet. Kamishak Bay will probably see an increase in the moisture during the day tomorrow. Then a break behind the front. From the St. Lawrence Island area, lighter winds, weak ridging, and dry conditions for the most part right down to the Alaska Peninsula, maybe some clearing in those areas. And then you start to pick up the showers as several troughs with the much colder air slowly moving eastward across the Bering Sea. And the Aleutians will be mostly a Bering Sea thing, and the Aleutians will be less impacted by it, but still close enough for some snow showers or periods of light snow at these passing trough there. Panhandle improving, becoming clearer, drier, and lighter winds except for Lynn Canal area and Stevens Passage, looking for gale force gusts out of the north. Both locations there tomorrow, otherwise isolated snow showers to the east. And for Tuesday, looks pretty good. Dry, sunny for the Panhandle there, light winds to no wind. In fact, gradient slackens over the entire forecast area here. Wind's not a significant factor at all anywhere in the state on Tuesday. Weakening front brings a band of light snow, areas of, possibly from northern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Copper River Basin northward. I don't expect the amounts anywhere there to be too significant, more maybe 1 or 2 inches at most. Snow and snow showers again with another trough there for the northwest coast, across the Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta, and widespread snow and snow showers out over the Bering Sea, right down to the Aleutians, and right on the edge there for the Fox Islands and Alaska Peninsula area, drying out over Kodiak Island with some clearing. And for the lows tonight, 20 northern Panhandle, lower to mid 30s there on the southern southeast coast, 10 to 15 below Copper River Basin, and single numbers Kenai Peninsula, 5 to 10 call it Kenai Peninsula, Susitna, Matanuska Valley, but near 20 for Homer, mid 20s Kodiak Island, mid to upper 20s for the Bristol Bay area. And lows about 5 below for Fairbanks. Otherwise, Eagle about 18 below, minus 21 Arctic Village, and below zero eastern central Arctic coast, but lower 20s there on the west side with warm southerly flow. Lows in the upper 20s, lower 30s western interior, and then lows with the colder air coming in from the west. Lower 20s for the western Aleutians, upper 20s Adak and Atka and the Pribilofs, mid to upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. And for highs tomorrow, lower 30s northern Panhandle, lower to mid 40s in the south, Copper River Basin around 20, and south central Alaska, lower to mid 30s, lower 40s Kamishak Bay, Homer, Seldovia, Kodiak, and King Salmon. Mid 30s Susitna Valley, mid 20s Tanana Valley, 10 to 20 over the northeast interior, and the Arctic coast there, rising in the upper 20s on the west side, but hanging below zero toward Barter Island. And 30 to 35 western interior areas, lower 20s for St. Lawrence Island, near freezing for the Pribilofs, lower 40s in the Alaska Peninsula, upper 20s for the highs over the western Aleutians. And for the lows, Tuesday morning, teens and 20s for the Panhandle, mostly in the 20s though, with teens to lower 20s, south central Alaska, 5 below Copper River Basin, mid 30s for Kodiak, Bristol Bay down the lower 20s, upper teens for the Kuskokwim Valley, and above zero mostly for the northern interior there, except for the northeast interior and eastern Arctic coast, a little below 0, and then a little above 0 back to the west, back down to 5 for St. Lawrence Island, 20s for the Bering Sea and the western central Aleutians, mid-20s to lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to first line weather graphic. Monday morning, VFR north slope out to the Arctic coast from the Brooks Range there. South of the mountains up there, area of marginal VFR, upper Yukon Valley along and north of the Yukon River there, and on up along the Porcupine River. Then back west, it kind of expands, covering much of the western interior, on down to some IFR there along the lower Yukon River, Kuskokwim Valley, into Togiak, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island IFR, and then a more pronounced band of IFR out over the eastern Bering Sea from the Point Hope, Cape Lisburn, Kivalina area across the western Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta areas west, the western portions of those zones, on down to the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula, followed by some VFR, Adak and Atka up to St. Matthew Island, and more marginal VFR over the southwest Bering. For the afternoon, the Aleutians become total VFR from the Komodorskis all the way to the Alaska Peninsula, or from Chimionat anyway, to the Alaska Peninsula, say to Sand Point, pick up some IFR, Bristol Bay covered in IFR as that whole frontal boundary shifts inland. So we've got IFR over the western interior to the extreme western Arctic coast, but VFR to the east, widespread VFR, really the eastern two-thirds of the state, central and eastern interior, northern panhandle, some IFR over the southern panhandle, some marginal VFR. And then for the morning on Tuesday, that VFR zone still holds over Adak and Atka and Fox Islands. Ekun Island may be false pass there and some marginal stuff, but that could shift either way. Not too serious. And marginal VFR Bristol Bay, western interior now, some VFR thrown in, and that boundary shifts into the central interior, kind of narrows, but holds a pretty solid zone of IFR from Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, right up across the Susitna Valley, all the way to the central Arctic coast, and then to the east side there, VFR with a few areas of marginal VFR, and still marginal area of marginal VFR and IFR over the southern southeast coast. And for the afternoon, that disappears, and the panhandle's pretty much VFR, except for Elfin Cove, start picking up some marginal VFR, eastern North Gulf Coast IFR, Cape Yakataga, Cape St. Elias area, Prince William Sound into say Passage Canal, possibly to Resurrection Base, Southern Cook Inlet VFR, and Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, up into the Yukon Delta, the zone of VFR, and that weakening frontal boundary kind of just doing a slow dissolve over the central part of the state with IFR. Northern Susitna Valley northward across the Yukon River into the eastern Brooks Range. Some more IFR for the northwest coast, Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew Island. Marginal VFR over the central Bering Sea and the central Aleutians, but VFR for the Fox Islands, much of the Alaska Peninsula, and the western and west central Aleutian areas. And for passes tomorrow, VFR for Adigan, VFR for Anatuvik and Adigan VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal to start, trending toward VFR into the afternoon as that first band sort of dissipates, and the one not quite reaching the area yet to the west. And rainy, same trend, VFR marginal VFR becomes VFR. And those lowest conditions will be on the western approaches, all three passes, probably staying VFR on the east side. Windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR. Mentasta, same forecast. Mentasta and Tanita, both VFR. Portage, VFR. Chilcoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels, southerly flow pulling some pretty good warm air right up into the lower Yukon River Valley area, 4,000 feet, and then another 4,000 foot line up over Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, 6,000 feet, just about to the Alaska Peninsula, 2,000 feet, southern southeast coast. Icing with that frontal boundary, just looking for some isolated moderate icing along that, mostly be of the light variety there, but a pretty solid band of elevated potentials for icing, western interior slowly moving eastward. And then some mixed icing threats there, back with the main low center for the Aleutians up to the Pribilofs, and chance of icing over the southern panhandle. Jet stream, south flow tomorrow, ridge shifting slowly eastward, but not as fast as originally thought. So on the west side of the ridge, southerlies up to 105 to 120 knots, northerlies 80 knots cutting across the southern border there. And at 9,000 feet, about the same pattern, except lighter, 45 to 85 knot winds, strongest up over the western Brooks Range, and 40 to 60 knot winds over the interior. 3,000 feet translates to a widespread area of considerable moderate turbulence, especially for small aircraft over the western interior Kodiak Island coming into Cook Inlet, St. Lawrence Island, and the central Aleutians as well. Everywhere else, pretty smooth.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us today is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
My pleasure, Dave.
Thank you. And you're joining us here to talk a little bit more about satellites and how satellites work, and especially one neat feature that's working over Alaska right now. What is that?
Well, there's a lot of weather satellites and a lot of instruments on these satellites, and there are new generations going up and new instruments. This includes something called the day-night band, which is not a cover band at the local bar, but it's a new satellite that is very useful, especially here in Alaska, especially in the winter.
In the wintertime, yeah, that makes it a little bit hard to use some of the normal tools that we associate with weather satellite imagery.
Right. You know, one of the classic weather satellite instruments is just visible light. What would the human eye see if you were riding on a weather satellite yourself and looked down and it was black and white? You'd see the clouds reflecting the sunlight. And we've got an example from the Pacific Ocean. There's a geostationary satellite, and we can see that the eastern side of the image is in daylight. The western side, it's night over there, so you don't see anything because there's no sunlight over there. And visible imagery, it's very intuitive. You see the clouds just like you see them standing on the ground, but now you're a satellite seeing them from above. But the problem is, what about the night side of the planet? How do you track the storms? How do you know where the rain is, the snow, the weather, if you can't see the clouds? And that's why, just like a television can change from one channel to another, or radio can change stations, satellites can change the frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum that they're looking at. We can go to infrared instead of visible light. You know, it's heat energy. You can see heat, and we've got another satellite picture from the same time, same satellite, out over the Pacific Ocean. That's the infrared side, and we're seeing temperature there. And even at night, when there's no light, everything still has a temperature.
So we're sensing something with a thermometer instead of perhaps the visible side of that, is what you're saying?
That's right. On this depiction, colder features are lighter shades, warmer features are dark. And so clouds tend to be colder than the ground. Clouds are higher in the atmosphere, it's cooler. And so that very same image on the western, or the left-hand side of the globe, now we can see the clouds there, even though it's nighttime, because we're seeing the temperatures. And one nice feature is that tropical storm there, just in the middle of the northern hemisphere there, hurricane or typhoon, depending on...
That's that swirly part that we see in the middle of the image?
There you go. You can even see the eye on it there, especially in the infrared image. So we've got two kinds of imagery there from the same satellite, different instruments, you know, different channels like on a television, visible and infrared. You know, it turns out there's no one magic tool. Each has its strengths, each has its flaws, weaknesses. The visible is nice, it's intuitive, it's easy to understand, but doesn't work at night. Infrared is nice, it works at night, you can see temperatures, but there is a catch. What if your clouds and the nearby bare ground or open water, what if those were about the same temperature?
Oh, that's going to be hard to figure out what's going on.
If you can only see temperature and you have two features that are the same temperature, they will look the same. You won't be able to tell. They're camouflaged. This happens, especially, it can happen around Alaska, especially over the ocean when you have low clouds that are the same temperature as the open water.
That happens quite a bit in Alaska.
We have an example. Now, this is from a different geostationary satellite. It's down over the Atlantic Ocean. Look in the South Atlantic. In infrared, we've highlighted in a yellow circle there. There's some patches of clouds, but it looks like there's a clear area in the middle of that image. That's the infrared look. But let's take a look at the visible channel, and we can see there's a stripe of clouds across the middle of that circle that is only visible in the visible. The trick here is that those are low clouds of about the same temperature as the surrounding ocean. So from an infrared point of view, where you're seeing temperature, the clouds in the water nearby are the same temperature, they look the same. It's only on the visible that you can see what stands out as the actual imagery. Two tools, each have their strengths and weaknesses. Can we combine them? That's where the day-night band comes in. It's a super sensitive visible sensor that can actually see by moonlight. It can even see the aurora. And in Alaska, we have long winter nights. We can use that day-night band. Here's an example from that storm that blew the Kulloch drilling platform ashore near Kodiak Island in December back in 2012. This image is right near when that storm happened, and it's in the middle of the night in December.
This looks like visible imagery.
Looks like daytime imagery. It's amazing. That sensor can take any little bit of moonlight and just make the most of it. We can see so much detail. Even in the northern part of the image there, you can see some aurora up there. The northern lights.
That's that band that goes across the Arctic slope?
You got it. That's the northern lights. We're seeing black and white image here, so you don't get the green or the purple colors there. But that is the aurora. There's another example of the day-night band, and this is from January of 2013. It's about 4 in the morning, and this is a snapshot from Weather Service software. And we can even see in the middle of the image, there's the lights of Fairbanks and North Pole over to Eielson Air Force Base. Anchorage and Matsu lights, city lights, are evident as well. We can see, even though it's 4 in the morning in January, there is no sunlight to be had, that just enough moonlight is available that this sensor can see that. So we're trying to solve that puzzle where visible light is good, but only during the daytime. IR is good at night, but you can't see the difference between clouds and ground sometime. The day-night band is an attempt to do the best of both with one tool. And it's brand new for Alaska here, and we're hoping to use it in the forecast process and help predict storms, weather patterns, to help get good forecasts for people.
Okay, another tool in the weather toolkit for meteorologists in Alaska and researchers worldwide. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And you can learn more about GINA and the day-night band by going to the web address that you see on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the sea ice analysis here. Not much change from yesterday. A little bit pulled back to the north there. Less ice around St. Matthew Island, especially less ice south of that area there. But holding pretty much a status quo. Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay, as well as the northern Bering to the Bering Strait. And for the coastal water forecasts, pretty light winds for the south coast of the Panhandle. In fact, really no strong winds out along the outer coastline, 10 to 20 knots on the south coast from the north and northwest. And the north coast, 15 to 20 knots out of the east-northeast, 7 to 8 foot seas. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, a little more of a breeze there, north 25, gusts 40 knots. Stevens Passage, north 20 with gusts to 35 knots. Otherwise, Clarence Strait, light northwest winds at 10 knots. Outlook for Tuesday. Not much change for Clarence Strait, holding on to that light northwest breeze. 10 knots, seas 2 feet, and southeast 15 for Stevens Passage. Lincoln Island, Glacier Bay, winds around to the south and will be lighter at 15 knots. And the south coast looking at a west-northwest breeze at 10 knots with 6 foot seas, and south to southwest 15 knots for the north coast. And for the Cook Inlet area, tomorrow looking at northeast winds 10 to 20 knots, east 20 knots Kamishak Bay, south 20 for the Barren Islands. Not too bad for the North Gulf Coast. Southeast 15 on the west side, around Middleton Island northeast of 15, seas 5 feet. Prince William Sound, light winds with slight seas, no more than 10 knots from the southeast. Those will become more easterly, pick up a little bit to 15 knots, seas around 3 feet there for Prince William Sound on Tuesday. Otherwise, eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast 20 knots, small craft advisories on the western North Gulf Coast for 25 knot winds from the southwest. Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, small craft advisories, west-northwest winds there, 30 knots, 9 to 10 foot seas, west 20, southern Cook Inlet, northwest 10, north of the Forelands. And for Kodiak Island, south to southeast winds 25 knots. That's good for small craft advisories, 30 knot winds from Sitkinak to Castle Cape from the south. Gale warnings from Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, south winds 35 knots. Bering Sea side, the Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds at 30 knots. And good gale force southeasterlies for Bristol Bay tomorrow at 40 knots with 8 foot seas. Those will fall back dramatically to just west at 10 on Tuesday. And the Alaska Peninsula west winds 15 knots, 20 knot winds from the northwest, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, and then small craft advisories east side of Kodiak Island, call it northwest, sustained 25 knots. Fox Islands, west winds 25 knots, seas 12 to 14 feet tomorrow for Monday. Small craft advisories also Adak and Atka, west 25 to 30 knots. And from Amchitka to Shemya, winds will be west at 30 knots. For Tuesday, from Shemya to Kiska, winds coming down to 20 knots, staying westerly though with 8 foot seas. And then 30 knot winds from the west or southwest for Amchitka, Adak, and Atka. and west-southwest 25 for Unmac Island, and then lighter winds for Unalaska Island, west 20 knots, seas 9 to 10 feet. For the southwest coast, gale warnings south of Nunivak Island. They'll be from the south at 40 knots. Yukon Delta coast to St. Lawrence Island, west at 35 knots. Norton Sound southeast 40 knots. And moving on to Tuesday, those winds come down all areas. Southwest 15, Norton Sound south 15 for St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots along the Yukon Delta coast, 15 knots south of Nunivak Island. Pribilofs west 20, St. Matthew Island, northwest at 20. For the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, for tomorrow, lightest winds will be over toward Demarcation Point. Still good for a brisk wind advisory, though, in that area, east at 30, but gale warnings for the remainder of the coastline all the way down to Wales with the strongest winds. Central coast, southeast 40 knots, 45-knot winds there from Cape Beaufort all the way to Wales. And then for Tuesday, those winds diminish pretty good, down to 15 knots, Wales to Cape Thompson, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, southwest at 10, western Arctic coast, 15-knot winds from the southwest. Call it southwest 20 for the central coast, west 15 on the east side, except over toward Barter Island to Demarcation Point, southeast at 25. And for tonight, we've got blizzard warnings from the Yukon Delta, Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast, northward to the western Arctic coast, including the Kobuk Valley blizzard warning. Winds 40, 55 miles an hour in gusts with blowing snow, reducing visibility to whiteout conditions at times, or less than a quarter mile. And first push of moisture there kind of starts to dissipate as it moves into the Kuskokwim Mountains, tries to get in the Kuskokwim Valley, but having a hard time pushing eastward. Main frontal boundary there swings across the Fox Islands with periods of rain to the Pribilofs, mixing with rain, warmer temperatures into the Yukon Delta. Along the coast, stays fair under high pressure, central eastern interior, rain and snow showers scattered around the central and southern.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.